listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you and welcome to The Briefing. They've got crazy eyes, razor teeth and an army of die-hard fans lining up for hours and sometimes paying thousands just to get one. In the second half of this episode, we're diving deep into the crazy world of Labubus and how this little plush toy has become one of the world's most in-demand fashion items. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spyrou. It's Friday, the 23rd of May.
Hey Tara, and to you listening. Police are pleading with residents in the flood-stricken New South Wales mid-north coast to listen to their warnings after 3 bodies were pulled from floodwaters and a 4th man remains missing. A 63-year-old man's body was recovered at a motorhome on Wednesday. A man in his 30s was found near Rosewood on Thursday, while yesterday afternoon the body of a 6-year-old woman was found in her vehicle after last speaking with a police officer the night prior.
And speaking at a police press conference last night, Assistant Commissioner David Waddell told media that the pair had been convoying toward Coffs Harbour together before reaching ankle-deep water. He says the officer told the woman he would be turning around and she should too.
He gave her his phone number and told her to continue with caution and not to enter floodwaters. About 30 minutes later, they got a phone call from her. She was in trouble. Search of the area today, we've located the woman in her vehicle, deceased. Please do not enter these floodwaters. It is a really dangerous once-in-a-lifetime event.
Meantime, thousands of residents are still isolated due to fallen power lines and cut-off roads, with many now saying that they've also been unable to contact friends and family due to phone infrastructure going down as well.
And in some good news, the system has now been downgraded to advice level. It's expected to track south today towards the Southern Hunter and Blue Mountains regions, with the trough heading for northeast Victoria.
To Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has this morning accused the leaders of Canada, France and the UK of being on the wrong side of justice, humanity and history. In a 5-minute video posted to socials only hours ago, Netanyahu called out French President Emmanuel Macron, as well as the Prime Ministers of the UK and Canada, Keir Starmer and Mark Carney, who this week demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and threatened Israel with sanctions.
Speaking in Hebrew, Netanyahu accused the 3 leaders of wanting Hamas to remain in power and rebuild. He also addressed the murder of the 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. yesterday, describing the incident as horrific and carried out by a brutal terrorist who wanted to kill Jews. Upon arrest, the 30-year-old suspect was heard yelling, "Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!" Authorities say he acted alone. He remains in police custody and is expected to front court later today.
Now, while we're speaking about Israel and Gaza, the Palestinian Health Ministry says at least 29 children and elderly have died from starvation in the last 2 days, with the UN confirming around 90 aid trucks carrying medicine, flour and nutritional supplies have entered the Strip and are slowly starting to reach the Strip's 2.1 million population. And this comes as the UN warned at least 14,000 Palestinian babies would die by the end of this week if aid didn't start to flow.
To New York, where rapper Kid Cudi has testified that Sean Diddy Combs looked like a Marvel supervillain during a confrontation more than a decade ago. Cudi, who you might know from his hit songs Pursuit of Happiness and Day and Night, told the court that his home was broken into, his dog locked in a bathroom and a Molotov cocktail thrown at his car after Combs discovered he was dating his on-again, off-again partner Cassandra Ventura during a lull in their relationship back in 2011. In court, Cudi said he believes the rap mogul was behind the attacks and that he ended the relationship with Cassie out of concern for their safety, believing Combs to be violent.
Now, his testimony comes as Combs faces federal charges including sex trafficking and racketeering linked to alleged abuse and coercion of men and women, including Ventura, at drug-fueled parties that have been called freak-offs. Now, Combs has pled not guilty to all charges.
Australia is already recording a record-breaking flu season, and we haven't even hit winter yet, Tara. There's been a surge in interseasonal cases since January this year, over 80,000 nationally, which is about 10k more than this time last year. Meantime, COVID and RSV cases are also through the roof. Nearly 70,000 people have caught COVID, and more than 50,000 have had RSV, both being infections of the lungs.
Now, experts say that vaccine fatigue is largely to blame here after a dip in the number of people that have been getting vaccinated since the pandemic. And to be honest, I think to say that there's a bit of vaccine fatigue is probably an understatement. Because if you actually look at the stats, Chris, this year just 12.8% of 15 to 50-year-olds have had a flu vax. So the largest part of the population, 21% of 50 to 65-year-olds, and then close to half of over 65s. While the smallest number, kids under 15, just over 7% of them have been vaccinated, which unsurprisingly are also the cohort who've caught the worst end of the stick so far this year with the surge of flu cases. A huge chunk of them have been school-aged children.
Aussie teens are turning away from booze thanks to education in schools and social media warning of its dangers. National drug data shows in 2001, around 7 in 10 young people had consumed alcohol in the last year, while in 2023 that dropped dramatically to just 3 in 10. The trend isn't just being seen in Australia, but is being seen around the world, with similar stats reported in countries like Sweden and in the UK.
Yeah, and experts say that the risks of drinking and the damage that it does to the brain, particularly for developing teens, are among the factors that are causing them to turn their backs on it, as well as alcohol's relationship with violence, poor mental health and decision-making. Now, young people have reported that sporting events and barbecues are among the times that they found it hardest not to drink, as well as just pointing to Australia's overall drinking culture more broadly. And look, I can attest to this. I have tried those no alcohols a few times that you can buy at some specific bars and at the shops. And I've tried to go alcohol-free, and it is hard, but only predominantly when in those social settings, like they said, barbecues and kind of events where it almost feels like there's this expectation to do it. And I wish people wouldn't always ask, like, oh, why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you drinking?
Yeah, I'm in a similar camp at the moment. I have diagnosed myself with alcohol intolerance because every time I drink, I find myself getting sick, and not like sick from over-drinking, just sick from drinking. I raised that with a friend of mine the other day who recently turned 30, and she said to me, mate, that's just getting old.
I was just about to say that. I was like, Chris, I think that's called aging, my friend. Gets worse as you get older.
Give it up to Ray Gunnar!
And while we sadly won't be hearing any more of that in the next Olympics, with breakdancing ruled out of LA 2028, the same could be said for Brizzy in 2032. The selection process of which sports will feature in the Brisbane Games is well and truly underway, with the Games chief exec saying any new additions need to be realistic. And this has all happened as the International Olympic Committee was in Brizzy for the first time this week, having a tour of the host city for 2032, with major works set to kick off next year.
Yeah, and we heard from the chief executive, Cindy Hook. She said that the committee has been approached by more than a dozen international federations who want their sports included in the Games in Brisbane, but she's warned that the chances of the same 6 sports that have been added to the 2028 LA Games probably won't be the same 6 that we land on. Now, for context, those that have been added to those games include, count with me, baseball, flag football, lacrosse, squash, softball, and cricket.
Cricket.
So whether or not cricket features in the Brisbane 2032 Games seems like it's up in the air at the moment.
Surely. I feel like people will be pretty bloody pissed off if cricket doesn't make it to the Australian-held Olympic Games.
Yeah, 100%.
As much as I'm not a cricket fan, but I will back it here. There better be cricket at the 2032 Olympics in Brisbane. Also, I wouldn't mind seeing flag football because I saw just this week that they're allowing NFL players to try out for flag football in LA. So if they allow that again for 2032, heck yeah, I will be watching that. I am an NFL fan.
Yeah, I love this. I love when Brisbane was first announced as the host city, like a bunch of radio stations were doing phoners and getting people to call in going, oh, what sport would you like to be seen? One of my favourite ones was barefoot sand running in summer. I thought that is like inherently Australian, brilliant. And then one that I put forward that I absolutely loved was like communal nut bushing. So I would like to see dance troops from around the world trying to take on like a survival of the fittest nut bush and see who can last the longest kind of vibe.
Or turn the cricket into backyard cricket, pluggers and willy bins. I would love to see that.
We'll come back to the classics. Hey, Tara, thanks so much for that. That brings our headlines to a close. Up next is my deep dive, looking into the wild world of Labubus. If you have heard the word, if you have seen these freaky little things around, this deep dive is 100% for you. Stick around. Labubu. While I do enjoy saying the word, boy oh boy do I hate them. These little plush monster-looking toys with maniacal eyes and terrifying teeth are far from my description of cute, but I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. And they have an absolute stranglehold on the world at the moment, with people across Asia, Europe and Australia queuing up to 12 hours and dropping up to $10,000 just to nab one. Some stores in the UK have even paused sales this week amid allegations of violence in those queues. So while I'm clearly not the target market, that got me thinking about who exactly is and why these furry little freaks are clipped onto what feels like just about every second backpack and designer bag at the moment. Now, I've dived deep into this, way too deep than what I ever thought I would. And joining me now to pick my brain is the briefing's very own Helen Smith. Helen, welcome.
Hey, Chris. Now, I'm definitely the target market for this, so I'm really keen to dive deep in this. What made them first explode?
Okay, so one word, Lisa. Not Simpson, but Lisa from the K-pop group Blackpink. She's a massive global pop star. She has 106 million followers on Instagram. And above all, she's a massive, massive fan of plush toys in general. But it was last year that she was spotted with the $32 keyring version of Labubu attached to her luxury handbag. So there's actual dolls and then there's dolls on a keyring. The keyring Labubus are the ones you've probably seen around and that, yes, you're obsessed with. Anyway, it wasn't too long after that we saw similar pics from Rihanna and Dua Lipa. They were doing the exact same. And now we're at a point where over 1.4 million TikToks have been created with the Labubu hashtag. They're featured on a Louis Vuitton runway. All the while, the Chinese company behind the doll posted a 375% surge in revenue outside Beijing just last year. So, like I mentioned, it is having a huge moment, a moment that by the end of this episode, we will understand.
Yeah, look, those numbers are insane. So we know we're having this celeb element at the moment, and that's added to their must-have status. But that's not the only thing at play here. Before we get into more of that, where did Labubu come from?
Yeah, so good question. It was first created in the 2010s by a Hong Kong artist named Ka-Sing Lun, and it was one of several characters part of his Nordic fairy tale picture book series called The Monsters, and he said in a few interviews that was inspired by the Smurfs, which honestly, if you Google the pictures of the Labubu, like you can see
little
it.
tiny, creatures.
Yeah. So those books first hit the market in 2015, and in 2019, Lun partnered with Chinese toy company Pop Mart to make a bunch of these characters as plush toys. So consumers were very, very quick to flock to Labubu in particularly. So while there were a bunch of characters from the series that were made into plush toys, everyone was loving Labubu. And I'm quoting a fan here. They said that the reason they flocked to Labubu is because its ugly cuteness made it stand out from the rest. That is what that person told me, not how I personally feel. I just want that on the record.
Oh, I actually do love their ugly cuteness. I think that's a good description of them. Now, aesthetics aside, let's get into some of the clever marketing behind the rise of Labubu.
Yeah, well, the marketing is brilliant. I mean, Pop Mart's been in the business for over 15 years, and they're known for their blind box collectible toys. And most of the Labubus that are actually sold are sold in this way. So you don't actually know which Labubu is inside until after you've bought it and you've pulled it out. That's why a bunch of psychologists say this Labubu phenomenon has a cult-like obsession and following, because every purchase purchase becomes like a mini gamble, right? It activates those neurochemicals and dopamine circuits in your brain. So it becomes way less about the toy and more about the thrill, kind of like a Kinder Surprise, but just like 20 or 30 bucks more expensive. And look, this was the reason that China introduced laws banning the sale of blind boxes to minors back in 2023. It wasn't because of the Labubu specifically, but it was the fact that these blind box toys became such a widespread phenomenon. The kids were like skipping school, and it was also, it's incredibly addictive. So they're kind of getting on the front foot when it comes to things like gambling harm, I guess.
Yeah, because to me, it is kind of like soft gambling or glamorized gambling. And that's where these limited editions come into play, right?
Yeah, so on top of these mystery boxes, like you don't know which Labubu you're going to get, you've also got this idea of limited releases and even rare Labubus being sprinkled into drops here and there. So these sell out in minutes, both online and in-store. So that's why you see those massive queues wrapping around the block and stuff in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and it's insane.
Like 3 a.m. people are going and lining up.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And they're doing it knowing that the odds are against them. But, the hopes of snagging a secret Labubu that no one else has or that everyone wants, that keeps people hanging on, coming back for more. And it really does push them to look wherever they can to get their hands on them.
Yeah, which brings us perfectly to those insane price tags you mentioned at the top. Some people are spending up to 10 grand, so $10,000 on these things.
Yeah, they are. Well, now, look, it's not advertised at that price.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the key ring is about $32. You can pick one up for $32. But again, luck of the draw, whether you're going to get the one you want or not.
And it's just supply and demand, I guess.
Correct. So what this has opened up is a whole subsidiary market on places like Facebook Marketplace and even on eBay. So right now on eBay, there's a complete Labubu collection being advertised for $14,000.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of the larger Labubus, so you can get one the size of a regular teddy bear. That's going for $7K. Yeah. And then there's a heap of limited edition keyring Labubus, the ones we've been talking about this whole time, and they go anywhere from $40 to $4,000. So, I mean, yeah, not a cheap purchase in the slightest. There's also a heap of knockoffs you can nab starting at like $3.80.
This has been influxing my feed, like dupes, like a dupe of Labubu, or like they're calling them Lafufus or whatever they are. But yeah, this dupe culture and dupe market has also entered the Labubu space.
Yes, but the Labubu community, Helen Smith, they don't like this. They're not for the Lafufus or the Fobubus.
Yeah, I wouldn't be for them either. I'm for the Labubu.
Yeah, but it's very much that mentality of like fake designer. So, how people who own designer and work really hard to spend on designer, then they see a knockoff and they're just like, ugh. Not that I'm part of that camp in any capacity, but that mentality of how people feel about knockoffs. And the way that I was kind of rationalizing this, because I can't connect to plush toys or like wanting to collect plush toys, but what I can relate to is something like that I grew up with, which was Pokemon cards. And the whole concept of that was to catch them all. And I guess what we're seeing here is that, just with Labubus.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Labubu it's popping off right now, but as you said, it's not the first of its kind. We've seen these kind of collectibles, these trends, these soft gambling, if you want to call it, items pop off before. And yeah, there is this element of collectibles attached to it, and we've got the celebs loving them, so it's kind of infectious and trending. You've got to get them. While I get why kids are really getting into them, they're a toy, as you mentioned, we're seeing online right now older Gen Zs and even millennials joining these insane queues. What's behind that?
Well, I mean, I would like to flip the table and ask you, Labubu lover Helen Smith, but I won't put you on the spot. I will say that this is the exact reason that I did this deep dive, because as much as this is a silly trend that people are getting on, there's something deeper here that I really wanted to unpack and unpick. So, top line, adults account for just over a quarter of all global toys sales a year. And I mean, we all know someone who collects Lego. We all know someone who might still have a Cabbage Patch Kids, right? And just to be clear, these are like adults spending their money on toys for themselves, not for their kids. So that's like, around 25% of adults around the globe are doing that. But Labubu's meteoric rise comes at a pretty cooked time when it comes to world events and the global economy. Like disposable incomes right now aren't looking great at the moment. moment, and big purchases are feeling incredibly out of reach for a lot of us, especially that younger generation. So it's in this financial environment that a lot of economists are saying the little treat economy thrives. And what I mean by that is, this thing we talk about at length on the podcast, it's the idea that Gen Z and millennials, we have this mindset of everything's too expensive, everything's a little bit cooked at the moment, so let me just spend my money on the small things that are going to make me happy and that I want to spend my money on.
Yeah.
And so Labubu has become that little treat that, sparks that moment of joy, but also taps into a lot of people's happy place, which is this nostalgia factor. Don't get me wrong, I look at Labubus and I see demonic trolls. but in a world where, you can barely tell what's real and fake online anymore and everyone's locked on a screen, there's something kind of wholesome about seeing a slight return to simpler times, where all someone needs is a silly little plush toy and that's it, like their day's made. So, that's a definite factor that's playing into, the meteoric rise of Labubu.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, economic times, like all these recession indicators or recession trends and buying small luxury items, it definitely fits the bill. Chris, thanks for taking us through the wild world of Labubu.
You're so welcome.
You've stepped into it and you've learnt a heap. With all that said and done though, are you going to pop downstairs and go grab one? I'm guessing no.
Absolutely not. But after going on this wild deep dive journey, I'm less judgy about Labubu owners. I've walked away from this going, I get it.
It's just like a Pokemon.
It's just like a Pokemon card. And I mean, like I said at the top, who am I to yuck anyone's yum? I mean, power to the Labubu owners out there.
Yeah, and that's it for this episode of The Briefing. You can reach out to us on socials and let us know how you feel about Labubus, whether you have one or you want one or you never want to see one of their faces again. And don't forget, we'll be back in your feed with another ep de Savo. And like always, Antoinette Latouf will be with you on the weekend for The Weekend Briefing.
With all that said, I'm Chris Spyrou.
I'm Helen Smith.
We'll catch you next time.
Listener.